At my husband's celebration dinner, his big promotion party, he thought it would be hilarious to toast me like this. He taps the $500 champagne flute. The room goes quiet. "Meet my wife, Jane," he says, a smirk playing on his lips. "No ambition, no plan, just living off my success." The whole room, 30 of his colleagues and clients, burst out laughing. I didn't. I smiled, a cold, sharp smile. I raised my glass right back at him and said, "Enjoy it, Sean. This is the last joke you'll ever make at my expense." Then I walked away, and in that moment, I wasn't just leaving a dinner. I was reclaiming my entire life. Meet my wife. No ambition, no plan, just living off my success. Those were the words my husband, Sean Hamilton, spoke into a microphone at the Atlas Room, one of those sickeningly expensive Manhattan restaurants where a single steak costs more than a car payment. In front of 30 of his colleagues, his clients, and the top brass from his Wall Street firm. He was holding that champagne, smiling, like he'd just told the funniest joke in the world. And they were all laughing. His boss, George, was howling. I was sitting 3 feet away from him. 3 feet. Wearing the navy blue silk dress I'd spent an hour picking out, the one I thought made me look appropriate for his high-stakes corporate world, the one I bought to make him look good. My hands were folded in my lap. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would break a rib. I was not laughing. Before we get into the payback, and trust me, the payback is brutal, I want to thank you for being here. This channel is for stories that matter, stories about people who get knocked down and get back up. If you believe that invisible work deserves recognition and that your dignity is non-negotiable, please consider subscribing right now. It's free. But if you scroll by, if you just watch and leave, you're telling the algorithm that stories like this don't matter. You're proving that invisible people should stay invisible. Don't be that person. Hit the button. Prove you see the value here. Now let's get back to what happened. 15 years. That is how long I had spent building the invisible scaffolding that allowed Sean Hamilton to become the youngest senior vice president in the history of Blackwood Capital. 15 years. Think about that. 15 years of me staying up until 3 a.m. editing his presentations. Not just proofreading, I'm talking rebuilding his entire argument, making him sound smarter, sharper, more persuasive than he actually was. 15 years of hosting these god-awful dinner parties at our Midtown condo. I memorized everything. I knew which client preferred Pappy Van Winkle and which one needed his ego stroked every 5 minutes. I knew which wife was new money and which was old money and how to talk to both. 15 years of my strategic advice, whispered to him in bed, that he would turn around and present in the boardroom the next day as his own thinking. 15 years of me managing every single detail of our household, our finances, our lives, so he could work those 80-hour weeks without ever once wondering if we had toilet paper or if the mortgage was paid. I was the COO of his entire life, and I was doing it for free. And in one toast, one single 30-second toast in front of everyone who mattered in his world, he reduced all of it to nothing. No ambition, no plan, just living off his success. I am Jane Hamilton, and this is the story of how I stopped being invisible. But I need to go back. I have to. Because you're probably thinking, Jane, how could you let this happen? How do you let a man erase you so completely? I need to explain how I became someone who could be erased, how my own husband could look at me and believe the lie he was telling. I need to tell you about the 15 years that led to that microphone, that toast, and that moment when everything I had built came crashing down and lit the fire that would burn his world to the ground. It started small. It always does, doesn't it? When Sean and I got married, I was 28. I had my own career, a damn good one. I was in high-end event planning for a big corporate firm in NYC, and I was a boss at it. I could read people. I knew how to create experiences that made clients feel like royalty. I was the master of 1,000 tiny details that mean the difference between a successful event and a dumpster fire. Sean, he was just a junior analyst at Blackwood Capital. He had ambition, sure. Kid from Jersey who wanted to be the next Wolf of Wall Street. It burned hotter than his actual position, that's for sure. He worked insane hours, came home smelling like stale coffee and desperation, and talked endlessly about the career he was going to build. And I believed we were partners. No cap, I really did. We were a team. We talked about his work, my work. We made decisions together. We split the chores in our tiny-ass apartment in a way that felt fair. But then Sean got his first major promotion, the first big bonus. He started traveling 3 weeks out of every month. And something shifted. The ground beneath me just tilted. We had what seemed like a practical conversation about logistics. "Jane, honey, someone needs to be home," he'd said. "Someone needs to manage the apartment, pay the bills, make sure we have, food in the fridge." I was making decent money. I was on my own track, but Sean's salary had just doubled. He was in finance. The ceiling for him was the stratosphere. The ceiling for me was, well, it was lower. "It just makes financial sense," he said, "just for a little while. Just until I get this new territory locked down. Temporarily." Temporarily became 6 months. 6 months became a year. A year became permanent. It happened so gradually, so slowly, that I didn't even notice it was happening until it had already happened. I was boiled, like that frog in the pot, and I didn't even feel the water getting hot. I told myself I was making a strategic choice. Sean's career had rocket fuel behind it. Mine could wait. We were building something together, and sometimes building together means one person holds the foundation steady while the other person climbs. "I'll have my turn later," I told myself. "Right now, I'm investing in our future." But here's the thing they don't tell you about investing. An investment requires acknowledgement of its value. And acknowledgement, that was the first thing to go. It disappeared so slowly, I didn't realize it was gone until I was bankrupt. I became the person who knew everything about Sean's professional world without officially existing in it. I was his ghost, his secret weapon. I learned that George Stanton, Sean's big boss, was a man who responded more to personal connection than to a spreadsheet. He had a daughter, Catherine, who was deep into the equestrian scene out in Wellington, Florida. I did my research, I learned the names of her horses, and if you asked about her competitions with genuine interest, which I faked, George would talk for 40 minutes straight and leave the conversation thinking you were the most brilliant person he'd ever met. I made sure Sean asked about Catherine every single time. I wrote the questions down for him on a sticky note. Ask him how Starlight's recovery is going. He'd palm the note, and his questions would sound authentic, not like the strategic plant they were. I learned that the Lowen account, one of Blackwood's most valuable clients, was managed by a guy named Tom Grayson, and his wife Sandra was obsessed with antique jewelry. So when we hosted the Graysons for dinner at our new upgraded condo, the one my management of our finances allowed us to buy, I wore a vintage bracelet I'd inherited from my grandmother. I casually mentioned its history. Mrs. Grayson spent an hour examining it. By the end of the night, she was inviting me to an estate sale in Greenwich the next weekend. That dinner, that one conversation I orchestrated, it translated into Tom Grayson specifically requesting Sean to manage his next $50 million investment portfolio review. Sean got the win. I got to clean the dishes. I turned our home into a strategic asset, a weapon in his corporate war. The dinner parties I hosted weren't just parties. They were carefully staged productions. They were opportunities for Sean's colleagues and clients to relax, to let their professional guards down, to see him as more than just a shark in a suit. I planned menus that were impressive as hell, but not nouveau riche, pretentious. I made sure the conversation flowed, that no one felt left out, that everyone left feeling like Sean was someone worth knowing, someone worth betting on. And late at night, after the guests were gone and the house was finally quiet, I'd sit with Sean at our dining table, and I'd help him with his real work. He'd pull out his laptop, all stressed out, and walk me through the presentations he was preparing for the board. I'd read his proposals and tear them apart. "Sean, your argument is weak here. Your tone is way too aggressive here. You're scaring the old money. You need more data to back this up. You look like you're guessing." I had a gift for seeing how other people would react to his ideas, for knowing when he needed to soften his pitch and when he needed to go for the jugular. He started asking for my input on everything, every major pitch, every client proposal, every negotiation strategy. I was his uncredited coworker. I remember the night before his presentation on the Thornfield merger. This was the one, the $40 million deal that would eventually make him SVP. It was 2:00 a.m. He called me from a hotel in Denver, panicking. "Jane, they're not buying it," he was whisper shouting into the phone. "The board isn't buying my risk assessment. George thinks I'm overselling the upside. The whole damn deal is falling apart." I got out of bed. I opened my laptop. He sent me the presentation. And I spent the next 3 hours rebuilding his entire argument from the ground up. I found the places where his arrogance had made him sloppy. I restructured his financial projections so they sounded less like a gamble and more like a sure thing to the conservative investors. I softened his language in some places and sharpened it in others. At 5:20 a.m., I sent him the revised version. He called me back 20 minutes later. His voice was, God, it was filled with so much relief, so much gratitude. Jane, you saved me, he said. You're a genius. I don't know what I would do without you. You are the reason any of this is possible. And I remember feeling this warm glow, this pride. I believed him. I believed absolutely that we were partners, that his success was our success, that the foundation I was building mattered, even if my name was never on a press release. I genuinely believed that. I believed it when I hosted his clients. I believed it when I managed every bill. I believed it when I gave up my own ambitions because his career had more potential. I believed it right up until the moment he stood up at the Atlas Room, in front of all those people, and told them I had no ambition, no plan, and was just living off his success. The afternoon before that dinner, I'd spent an hour getting ready. I chose that navy dress. It was elegant but not flashy, appropriate. It was a uniform, the uniform of the supportive corporate wife. I did my makeup. I reviewed my mental cue cards, which colleagues would be there, which clients I needed to suck up to, what topics to avoid, what questions to ask to make them feel special. This was my job. This was what I had been doing for 15 years. Sean came home that afternoon and he had that energy, that high voltage, I just conquered the world energy. His face was flushed, his tie was already loosened. We got it, he said, throwing his briefcase on the couch. Thornfield signed this morning, $40 million. He grabbed me and kissed me, but it was a distracted kiss. His mind was already on the next thing, the celebration, the victory lap. Youngest senior vice president in Blackwood's history, he said, more to himself than to me. He was so proud, and I was proud of him. I really was. I knew how hard he'd worked for this. I knew because I had been there. I had been there for every 3 a.m. panic attack, every late-night revision, every single moment of doubt. I was his strategist, his editor, his goddamn therapist. I had rebuilt his arguments. I had found the weak points before his enemies could. I had earned this celebration, too. But standing in our bedroom that afternoon, holding that navy dress, watching Sean already typing urgent messages on his phone, I felt something cold. Underneath the pride, a whisper. The whisper told me I had become invisible in my own marriage. It told me that my contributions only mattered when Sean needed them, and they disappeared from his memory the second he got the credit. I ignored the whisper. I'd been ignoring whispers like that for years. Small moments, little red flags that I'd explained away. Like when Sean started introducing me at business functions as just my wife instead of Jane. Or the jokes he'd make about my lack of a real career. They stung. But I'd just laugh them off because I didn't want to seem oversensitive or dramatic. I'd even noticed him restructuring our finances, moving big investments into accounts in his name alone. When I questioned him, he'd been so dismissive. Babe, it's just for tax optimization. It's complicated. Don't worry your pretty little head about it. And I accepted it because I trusted him. He'd stopped asking my opinion on work. He'd stopped crediting me when clients mentioned how great our dinner parties were. He had stopped seeing me as a partner. I had become domestic logistics, the person who made his life run smoothly so he could focus on what really mattered. I ignored all of it because I had invested 15 years of my life into this partnership. And acknowledging that the partnership had become a one-sided parasitic relationship, that would mean admitting those 15 years were a waste. It would mean confronting the fact that I had erased myself so gradually and so completely that even I had started to believe I wasn't contributing anything of value. But that night at the Atlas Room in front of 30 people, Sean made it impossible to ignore anymore. He reduced 15 years of my labor, my strategy, and my life to a punchline. No ambition, no plan, just living off my success. And everyone laughed. I'm going to pause the story for 1 second because I need to ask you something. If your blood is boiling right now, if you know exactly what it feels like to be undervalued, to be the ghost in someone else's success story, then you need to hit that subscribe button. If you don't, you're basically saying this kind of behavior is okay. You're siding with Sean. You're siding with the bullies. Don't be an enabler. Don't be a bystander. Hit the button. Let's send a message right now. The valet took our car. Sean placed his hand on the small of my back, guiding me into the Atlas room. It probably looked affectionate from the outside, but to me, it felt like management, like he was steering a piece of luggage. The restaurant was a lot. It was exactly what I expected. Crystal chandeliers the size of a smart car, walls covered in some kind of fabric that probably cost more per square foot than our first apartment. Every surface gleamed. It was the kind of place that screams, "I have more money than you." The other guests were already there. Men in dark tailored suits that fit too perfectly. Women in dresses that whispered, "expensive," instead of shouting it. I recognized the faces. There was George Stanton, Sean's boss, near the bar, holding what I knew was a $200 glass of single malt. His wife, Margaret, stood beside him, wearing enough diamonds to blind someone. The Lewin account team had arrived. Tom Grayson and his wife, Sandra, the antique jewelry lady. She waved at me, a little too brightly. Sean was energized. He was on fire. He moved through that room with a confidence that was right on the edge of arrogance, shaking hands, clasping shoulders, laughing just a little too loud. He was the king, and this was his court. I followed a step and a half behind, smiling, nodding, playing the role I had perfected. Margaret Stanton, the boss's wife, cornered me first. She looked at my navy dress with an assessment that took less than 3 seconds but recorded every single detail. Her smile was polite and completely empty. "Jane, how lovely to see you. That dress is charming, very understated." Understated, the code word for not expensive enough. The classic rich wife power play. Years ago, that would have crushed me. But I'd learned. Responding to these little cuts only makes them deeper. I smiled back with equal emptiness. "Thank you, Margaret. You look stunning as always." She touched her necklace, a practiced, modest gesture. "Oh, this old thing? George picked it up at a charity auction." And she was off, launching into some long, boring story designed to tell me how much it cost. I made the right listening noises. Wow. Incredible. While my attention drifted to Sean. He was talking to George now, both men holding their drinks, standing in that way that successful men stand when they're talking about important things. George said something. Sean laughed, that same too loud laugh, the one that signals agreement, not actual amusement. A woman appeared at my elbow. "Jane, right?" I turned. It was Denzel Chin, one of the only female colleagues at Sean's level. She was younger than me, maybe 35, with a shark's intelligence in her eyes and none of the fake plastic warmth the other corporate wives were spraying around. "We met at the Hamptons retreat," she said. I remembered her. She'd been genuine. She'd asked me about my background in event planning instead of just dismissing me as Sean's wife. "Denzel, yes. Hi. How are you surviving?" She glanced around the room, and her expression, just for a second, showed she found this whole performance as exhausting as I did. "These dinners are always such a production," she said, sipping her wine. "Everyone performing their corporate roles. It's like we're all in some really expensive, really bad play." Her honesty was like a glass of cold water. I felt myself actually relax, just a fraction. "It does feel a bit theatrical," I said. "That's a diplomatic way of putting it." She watched Sean and George across the room. "Your husband is having a hell of a moment. The Thornfield deal was impressive, very aggressive strategy, but it paid off." I felt it again, that flicker of pride all mixed up with something bitter. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to say, "You know that aggressive strategy? It was too aggressive. It was sloppy. I was the one who stayed up until 5 a.m. 3 nights in a row, finding the balance that made the board comfortable enough to approve it." I wanted to tell her about the 2 a.m. phone calls, the panic, the real work, but I couldn't. That would sound like I was trying to take credit for Sean's work, and women who do that at these events, they get labeled bitter, delusional, difficult. So I just smiled. "He worked very hard for it," I said. Denzel looked at me, really looked at me, with an expression I couldn't quite read. It was recognition, or maybe sympathy. "I'm sure he did," she said. We were guided to a private dining room, one of those long, medieval-looking tables, more silverware than any one meal could ever need. Place cards, of course. I was seated in the middle of the table, far enough from Sean that we couldn't talk, but close enough that I had to watch him hold court. Denzel was across from me, which felt like a small mercy. The appetizers arrived. They were tiny. tiny architectural achievements that looked like they were assembled with tweezers. I ate mine in 2 bites and was immediately still hungry. The conversation was exactly what you'd expect. Market analysis, competitor movements, industry trends, people recounting their wins with this fake strategic modesty. The men dominated, of course. The women smiled and nodded. I had nothing to contribute. Not because I didn't have opinions. I had tons of opinions. I probably knew more about the Thornfield deal than half the people at that table, but speaking up would require explaining how I knew, and that explanation would make Sean look weak. It would make him uncomfortable. So I stayed quiet. I watched, and I felt myself becoming more and/or invisible with every tiny, expensive course that arrived. George Stanton, the boss, had barely even looked at me when we said hello. He looked right past me, like I was part of the wait staff, his attention locked on Sean. It's not personal, I told myself. I just don't matter to his objectives. I have no title, I have no position, I'm not relevant. But God, it felt personal. It felt like confirmation of what I'd been sensing for months, that I wasn't a person anymore. I was just Sean's wife, a descriptor, an accessory. The main course arrived, the conversation kept going, and then Sean stood up. The table fell silent, immediately. 30 people turned their heads to him. That's the kind of focus that important men command. Sean held his champagne glass. He smiled, that confident practice smile, the one I helped him perfect in front of a mirror 10 years ago. I smiled too. I was still proud of him, despite everything. He'd worked hard for this. We had worked hard for this, even if only one of us was getting the credit. I expected the standard speech. Thank you to the team. Recognition of hard work. Maybe if I was lucky, a vague mention of the support system at home that made his success possible. Sean started speaking. His voice was smooth, comfortable with the authority. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. The Thornfield merger. It's not just a business achievement. It's a validation of strategy, persistence, and vision. He paused. People nodded. George raised his glass just slightly in approval. But I couldn't have done this alone, Sean continued. I had support along the way. My heart, it lifted. Just a little. Maybe he was going to do it. Maybe in front of all these people he was finally going to recognize me. To say that partnership actually meant something. Sean turned toward me. He was still smiling. His eyes met mine, and something in his expression, something cold and slick, made my stomach clench. I want to introduce you all to my wife, Jane. He gestured toward me like he was presenting a show pony. 30 pairs of eyes, George's, Margaret's, Denzel's, Tom's, all shifted to me. No ambition, he said. No plan. Just living off my success while I do the real work. Music cuts to dead silence, then a low, ominous drone. The words landed like punches. My brain just stalled. It tried to find another interpretation, a way for those words to mean something else. It was a joke, right? This has to be a joke, but there was no other interpretation. Sean had just reduced 15 years of my life, my work, my sacrifice, to a punchline, for them. He had just told this entire room that I was worthless. Time did something weird. It stretched out like taffy. Each second felt like an hour, but everything was also happening way too fast. I watched their faces. First confusion, then uncertainty. Is this funny? Are we supposed to laugh? Then they looked back at Sean, and he was still smiling, still holding his glass, proud, like he'd just delivered a zinger. And that gave them permission. The laughter started, little nervous chuckles. Then it got louder. George Stanton, the boss. He laughed the hardest. He threw his head back and howled. He literally wiped a tear from his eye with his napkin. Around the table, they all joined in. Some looked uncomfortable, but they were laughing anyway, because not laughing would be worse. Not laughing would create tension. Not laughing would mean you didn't get the joke. I sat there, completely still. I could feel my face doing something. I had no idea what. My throat was so tight I couldn't breathe, and every single eye in that room was on me, waiting to see what I would do. Would I laugh along? Prove I was a good sport? Would I burst into tears? Confirm I was as weak and oversensitive as he'd just painted me? Would I explode with anger? Give them a story to tell at the office tomorrow about Sean's crazy wife? And something inside me, something that had been bending for 15 years. Accommodating, adjusting, making itself smaller and smaller to fit the tiny space Sean allowed me. It didn't just bend, it snapped. But it didn't snap into rage, it didn't snap into tears. It snapped into clarity. Absolute, terrifying, crystal clarity. I saw myself exactly as these people saw me. Invisible, unimportant, an extension of Sean. I saw the woman I had become, the woman who accepted scraps of recognition and convinced herself it was a meal, the woman who had erased herself so completely that her own husband believed she was nothing. And in that one brutal second, I made a choice. I reached for my wine glass. The movement was slow, deliberate. I wrapped my fingers around the stem. The laughter around the table started to falter. I lifted the glass, slowly. 30 faces turned toward me, curious, uncomfortable, waiting for the scene. I raised the glass high. I looked directly across the table into Sean's eyes. His smile had frozen. The uncertainty was creeping in. He was realizing way too late that this part wasn't in his script. My voice came out. It wasn't loud, but it was steady. It was clear, and it cut through the silence in that room like a razor. Enjoy it, Sean. I held his gaze. This is the last joke you'll ever make at my expense. I took a sip of the wine. It was excellent. Probably cost $80 a glass. I wasn't about to waste it. I set the glass down. A careful, precise, silent placement. Then I picked up my clutch. I pushed my chair back. The sound of the wood scraping the floor was deafening in that room. I stood up. I smoothed my understated navy dress, and I walked toward the exit. I wasn't running. I wasn't storming out. I was just walking. With the kind of calm that comes when you finally make a decision you should have made a decade ago. I didn't look back. I didn't look at George or Margaret or any of the other hyenas who had laughed at my execution. I just walked. Through the private dining room, through the main restaurant, where other rich people looked up from their tiny food, through the ornate lobby, and out the front doors into the cool, sharp October air of New York City. Okay, I have to stop. My heart is racing just telling this part. If you are living for this, if you are done letting people walk all over you, then you know what to do. You need to subscribe. You're still here this deep into the story. That means you're not a casual. You're invested. But if you're invested, why haven't you hit the button? Are you afraid? Do you think subscribing makes you part of the drama? Let me tell you something. By not subscribing, you're proving you're just a tourist in other people's pain. You're not a supporter. This is your moment to prove you're an ally. Hit the subscribe button. If you won't, then you have to go to the comments and tell me why. Tell me why you're choosing to be a silent bystander. I'm waiting. Outside, under the elegant awning, I finally stopped. And my hands, my God, they were shaking. Full-on adrenaline dump. My fingers were trembling. My heart was pounding against my ribs like it was trying to escape. But underneath the shaking was certainty. I pulled out my phone. I opened a new note. If I was going to dismantle my old life, I wasn't going to do it with emotional chaos. No, I had spent 15 years applying precision and strategy to Sean's career. Now I was going to apply those same skills to my own future. I typed 4 rules. Rule 1, do not respond to his texts tonight, no matter what he says. Rule 2, document everything, every contribution, every sacrifice, every invisible hour. Rule 3, protect what is mine. Rule 4, never again confuse being supportive with being invisible. I read the rules twice. Then I opened my Uber app. The driver was 7 minutes away. I gave the address for Michelle's apartment. My sister. It was the one place I could go, the one person I could talk to who wouldn't tell me I was overreacting. The one place I could think clearly without Sean's presence contaminating my decisions. The car arrived. A black Escalade. I climbed in the back. I watched the city lights of Manhattan blur past the window as we went over the bridge to Brooklyn, and I felt the first real deep breath I had taken in, maybe 15 years, fill my lungs. Michelle's building was a modest 3-story walk-up in Park Slope. Character over luxury. I climbed the stairs and knocked. It was nearly 10 p.m. She might be asleep. The door flew open in seconds. Michelle stood there, in pajama pants and an old NYU sweatshirt, her hair in a messy bun. Her expression went from surprised to immediately concerned when she saw my face. She didn't ask what happened. She just stepped aside, pulled me into a hug, and shut the door behind me. She guided me to the couch, went to the kitchen, and came back with a glass of water. She pressed it into my shaking hands. "Drink," she said. I drank. The water was cold. It grounded me. Michelle waited. She's a middle school teacher. She has a PhD in waiting for people to find their words. "Sean." "He made a toast," I said finally. My voice sounded weird, distant. "At the dinner, in front of 30 people from his firm." I looked at her. He introduced me as his wife, with no ambition, no plan, just living off his success. Michelle's expression didn't change, but her hands tightened on the arms of her chair. Everyone laughed, I continued, the words starting to spill out. His boss, George, he laughed the hardest. And I sat there, Chell, and I realized he believes it. Sean actually believes what he said. He genuinely thinks I've contributed nothing, that everything he's built, he built alone. The dam broke. I told her everything. The years of gradual erasure, the late-night editing sessions, the client relationships I managed, the strategic advice he passed off as his own. I told her about the finances, the accounts I'd noticed being moved, the tax optimization. My voice broke, but I pushed through. I needed to say these truths out loud, to someone who wouldn't gaslight me. Michelle listened. She just listened. When I finally stopped, exhausted, she leaned forward, and she said with the kind of clarity that just cuts through all the crap, "Jane, you've been his chief operating officer for 15 years. You just did it without the title, or the salary, or the stock options." She pointed at me. "Everything he built is standing on an infrastructure that you maintained. It's time to send him the invoice." The metaphor. It landed. She was right. I had been performing a job. I had convinced myself that partnership meant not keeping score, that love meant supporting someone without ever expecting anything in return. But what I had been calling partnership, that was exploitation. What I had been calling love, that was erasure. "I walked out," I said. I raised my glass and I told him it was the last joke he'd ever make at my expense. And I just left. Michelle smiled. For the first time, it was a fierce, proud smile. "Good," she said. "Damn good. So, what are you going to do now?" I didn't have the whole plan, but I had the beginning of one. "I'm going to make sure he understands exactly what he lost," I said. "I'm going to document every single thing I contributed, and I'm going to make sure it gets recorded somewhere he can never erase it." Michelle moved to the couch and put her arm around me. "You can stay here as long as you need," she said. "Guest room is all yours. We'll figure this out. Together." I spent that night in Michelle's guest room. I didn't sleep. My mind was racing. Around midnight, my phone on the nightstand started buzzing. I had silenced the ringer, but I could see the screen light up. Again. And again. I picked it up. It was Sean. "Sean, 12:01 a.m. Where did you go? Why did you leave like that?" "Sean, 12:15 a.m. Jane, you're overreacting. It was a joke. Everyone knew I was joking. Call me." "Sean, 12:30 a.m. This is ridiculous. You embarrassed me. In front of my colleagues and my boss. Come home, now. We need to talk about this like adults." "Sean, 1:00 a.m. I don't understand why you're being so dramatic. You made a scene for no reason." "Sean, 1:45 a.m. You're being irrational. This is exactly why people don't take you seriously. You're proving my point." "Sean, 2:30 a.m. Fine. Stay wherever you are. But this is childish and you know it." The texts kept coming, escalating, from confusion to irritation to pure, unadulterated anger. He was gaslighting me through the phone, but the one that arrived at 3:00 a.m. That was the one. That was the one that told me everything. "Sean, 3:00 a.m. You're embarrassing me in front of my colleagues. They're asking questions. This reflects badly on both of us. Come home, and we'll figure out how to handle the damage you caused." I read that message 3 times. His embarrassment mattered. My humiliation did not. My absence was the problem. His public degradation of me was just a joke. The damage I caused by leaving was worse than the damage he caused by reducing 15 years of my life to a punchline. That one text told me everything I needed to know. I didn't respond. Instead, I took screenshots of every single message, and I forwarded them all to my email address. This was the first entry in my new documentation. Then, I opened that new note, and I started making lists. Every client relationship I had nurtured, every presentation I had edited, every dinner party that led directly to a business opportunity, every piece of strategic advice I had given him, every late-night panic call, every sacrifice I made so he could work those 80-hour weeks. I wrote until my hands cramped. I wrote until the sky outside Michelle's Brooklyn window started to turn from black to gray. When Michelle knocked on the door around 7 o'clock a.m., I had pages of it. Detailed, specific, dated examples of contributions, an entire career's worth of work that Sean had erased from his narrative. She brought me coffee. "This is evidence," she said, scrolling through the lists on my phone. "This is proof. You weren't just supporting him, Jane. You were building his career right alongside him." "I need a lawyer," I said. The decision was crystal clear. I need someone who can help me make this official, somewhere he can't just dismiss it. Michelle nodded. "Do you know anyone?" I thought about all the slick corporate lawyers I'd met at Sean's parties. They'd all side with him. They were all part of the same good old boys club. But then I remembered. A woman. From a firm retreat in the Hamptons 3 years ago. She'd given me her card. "Queen," I said. "Queen Adebayo. She specializes in high-asset divorce, family law. I remember she told me, 'I wish more women would advocate for themselves before things become impossible.'" I found her number in my contacts, and I called her. Before I could second-guess myself, the phone rang 4 times. I was about to leave a message. A warm, powerful voice answered. "This is Queen." "Queen, this is Jane Hamilton. We met a few years ago at a Blackwood Capital retreat. You gave me your card, and you told me to call if I ever needed help." There was a brief pause, and then Queen's voice came back, calm and unsurprised, like she had been expecting this call for 3 years. "I remember you, Jane. Tell me what happened." We arranged to meet that afternoon at a cafe called The Grind in the West Village. I chose it deliberately. It was the anti-Atlas room. Scarred wood tables, mismatched chairs, concrete floors. No one from Sean's world would ever be caught dead in a place like this. It was perfect. Queen arrived exactly on time. She was in her late 40s, dark hair pulled back, wearing a sharp blazer over jeans. She commanded the space without even trying. She ordered a black coffee and sat across from me. She radiated an energy that was both safe and dangerous. "Tell me everything," she said, pulling out a tablet. "Start with last night," I told her. The dinner, the toast, the laughter, my exit. Sean's escalating, gaslighting texts. She just took notes, no reaction. Her focus was absolute. When I finished, she set down her stylus. She looked at me, and she didn't sugarcoat it. "What do you actually want from this, Jane?" The question caught me off guard. I'd just been running on pure, uncut rage. I don't know," I said. "I just know I can't go back." "That's a start. It's not enough," Queen said. She leaned in. "Do you want a reconciliation? Do you want a divorce? Do you want financial compensation? Do you want him to suffer? I need to understand what outcome makes you feel like justice was served." I sat with that. What did I want? The answer started forming as I spoke it. "I want recognition," I said slowly. "I want an accounting. I want acknowledgement that I wasn't just living off his success. I was building the foundation. I want him to understand that the success he took credit for, it was built on my work, my unpaid, unacknowledged work." Queen nodded, typing. "That's actionable. Recognition means documentation. Accounting means financial analysis. Acknowledgement means creating a record that cannot be disputed." She looked up. Her eyes were sharp. "So we approach this strategically. 1. We document every single contribution, with evidence. 2. We do a deep dive forensic analysis of your marriage's financial structure. We find out exactly where the money is. 3. She paused. We consider what leverage you have beyond legal channels." I paused. "What do you mean beyond legal channels?" "Courts are slow, Jane. They're expensive, and they're emotionally draining," Queen explained. "Sometimes the most powerful pressure doesn't come from a judge. It comes from reputation. It comes from professional consequences." She smiled just a little. Your husband works in a world where image is everything. If we can demonstrate that his professional success, the success his firm is built on, was based on your unpaid, uncredited labor, well, that creates pressure points a lawsuit could never achieve. The idea. It felt strategic, and it felt a little dangerous. But I had walked away from safe when I walked out of that restaurant. What do I need to do? Queen turned her tablet toward me. We build a case. You are now a detective, investigating your own marriage. I need evidence, emails, texts, calendar entries. I need client names. I need presentation drafts, the before and after versions. I need a timeline of every social event you hosted and what business outcomes resulted from them. Can you do that? I thought about the 15 years of emails in my sent folder, the meticulous calendar I kept, the files. Yes, I said, I can do that. Good, Queen said. Now for part 2. We need to examine your financial records. Everything. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, property deeds, retirement accounts. I want to know how every single dollar has moved for the last 5 years. The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end, I had a checklist. I had a mission. Queen walked me to the door. You're doing the right thing, she said. Walking away took courage. This next part, this takes a different kind. You have both. You still with me? Good. Because this is where it gets really good. This is the part of the story that most people skip. They want the drama, but they don't want to see the work. But you're still here. You're not like them. Or are you? The analytics on this video show me that 80% of the people watching right now are not subscribed. You're just taking. You're taking this story, this emotion, and giving nothing back. Don't you feel a little guilty? If this story is holding your attention, if you feel anything right now, then you owe it to yourself and to me to hit that subscribe button. Don't be a freeloader. Don't be a ghost in the machine. Subscribe. If you don't, you're part of the problem. You're one of the silent laughers at the table. Go to the comments and tell me why you won't subscribe. I'll wait. The next 2 weeks, I became a ghost. But this time I was a ghost who was haunting him. I sat at Michelle's dining table, my laptop open, and I began to gather the evidence. I started with my email. I searched key terms, client names, Thornfield, Lewin, presentation. I found it all. I found the email thread with Tom Grayson from the Lewin account, the one where I followed up after our dinner party to send his wife Sandra the link to that antique jewelry estate sale. Tom had replied thanking me for connecting with his wife, and then mentioned in the next sentence that he was looking forward to working more closely with Sean. That dinner party I hosted, it directly resulted in millions of dollars of increased business. Sean's name was the only one on the commission report. I found dozens of emails from clients thanking me for making events feel welcoming and personal. Several mentioned they valued the personal connection they felt with Sean because of the relationships I had built. I found the presentation files, the ones Sean had sent me at 2 a.m. with help in the subject line. I had saved my edited versions with track changes on. I could see line by line my words, my strategic recommendations, my risk assessments, all the work that Sean had implemented and taken credit for. I created a spreadsheet, a detailed calendar reconstructing 5 years of social events I had planned. Next to each event, I noted the clients who attended and the business outcomes that followed within 6 months. The pattern wasn't just a coincidence, it was a correlation. My social infrastructure was a direct pipeline to his professional advancement. This was my work, and it was real. It was measurable. It was valuable. Then, I got to the financial investigation. Working with Queen, I requested statements from every bank, every institution. And what I discovered, it made me physically sick. This wasn't just him being an arrogant prick. This was calculated. This was malice. Sean had been systematically moving money for at least 18 months. The joint checking account, the one we both used, it was drained. Less than $2,000 in it. But a new account in his name only showed deposits totaling over $80,000 in the last 6 months alone. The investment portfolio, the one we were building together, it now only had his name on the ownership documents. And then, the final blow. Our vacation home, the one in the Hamptons, the place where we spent anniversaries, the place I had decorated. I checked the property records. My name had been removed from the deed 8 months ago. I sat in Queen's office staring at the documents. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Queen looked at me and she didn't mince words. "This is financial abuse, Jane," she said bluntly. "He's been preparing to marginalize you financially for a long time. That toast, that wasn't an impulse. It wasn't a joke. It was a celebration. He thought he was done with you. He thought he'd already won." The evidence. It changed everything. Walking out of that restaurant, part of me still hoped this was a mistake, that he was just an idiot, that he could apologize. But the financial records, they showed intent. This was systematic erasure. "What are my options?" I asked, my voice cold. Queen organized the documents into neat stacks. "We can pursue this through family court. It will take months, maybe years. It'll be a public, bloody fight, and we'll win." She paused. "Or we can create pressure through other channels, and maybe achieve a resolution much, much faster." "What kind of pressure?" "Your husband works at a firm that lives and dies on reputation," she said. "If we can demonstrate to his employer that his success, their success, was built on your unpaid labor, and that he was simultaneously stealing from you, well, that creates a massive professional liability for them." She smiled. "Firms like Blackwood Capital hate discovering that their star VPs are taking credit for work done by uncompensated family members. It raises ethical questions. It raises legal exposure. They hate loose ends. And Jane, you are the biggest loose end he has." I thought about the woman I was 2 weeks ago, the woman who would have been horrified at the idea of making trouble at Sean's work. That woman was gone. She burned to ash in the laughter at that dinner. "I want him to understand consequences," I said. "I want accountability, even if it has to be public." Queen's smile was sharp. "Then let's make sure he understands exactly what he lost." Queen spent the next 3 days drafting the letter. It was a work of art, surgical. We reviewed it twice. It was 3 pages. Page 1. Outlined my contributions to Sean's professional success, with specific examples, dates, measurable outcomes, the Lewin account, the Thornfield merger presentation, the 2 a.m. phone call, the spreadsheet of social events. Page 2. Presented the financial evidence, the bank statements, the investment portfolios, the Hamptons property deed, a clinical, undeniable pattern of financial abuse. Page 3, the proposal. We wanted formal recognition of my contributions. We wanted a financial settlement that reflected both the equitable division of marital assets and compensation for the business development work I had performed. The letter concluded with a deadline. Sean had 1 week to respond, after which we would be forced to make this information available through legal proceedings, which would, of course, become part of the public record. The letter was addressed to Sean, and it was CC'd to George Stanton, CEO, and 2 other senior partners at Blackwood Capital. It wasn't an emotional letter. It wasn't a scorned wife letter. It read like a business proposal. It treated my contributions as professional work that was due payment, and that's what made it so powerful. We scheduled the delivery, a certified messenger, Thursday morning, 9 a.m., right when we knew the weekly executive leadership meeting started. Then we waited. Thursday morning. Queen and I met at the grind. My phone was on the table between us, volume all the way up. The call came at 10:15 a.m. Sean's name. My hand was shaking. Queen just nodded. "Breathe," I answered. "Hello, Sean." "What the hell are you doing?" His voice was tight. Pure fury. "You can't send letters to my firm about our private marriage. This is insane, Jane. You've completely lost it." I let the silence stretch. 3 full seconds. Queen had coached me on this. The power of not rushing to fill the silence. "You made our marriage public, Sean," I said. My voice was level, cold. "You made it public when you used me as a punchline in front of 30 of your colleagues. I'm simply providing context." "Context?" He was sputtering. The anger was giving way to panic. I could hear it. "You're trying to destroy my career over a joke. Richard is furious. The partners are asking questions. You're making me look incompetent." "That doesn't work for me," I said. The words Queen had taught me. Simple, clear, unarguable. "You have 1 week to respond to the settlement proposal, Sean. After that, we proceed through formal channels." Jane, wait. Wait. We can talk about this, just you and me. No lawyers, no letters, none of this drama you're creating. Come home. We'll work this out. Like adults. Like adults. I almost laughed. The proposal is clear, Sean. You have 1 week. I ended the call. My whole body was trembling, but underneath it, I felt solid. Queen reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Well done, she said. That was perfect. That evening I got an email from a sender that surprised me. It was Denzel Chin, the colleague from the dinner, the subject line, simply, thank you. I opened it. Dear Jane, I hope it's okay that I'm reaching out. I heard through firm channels about the letter. I don't know the details and I'm not asking. I just wanted to say, watching you walk out of that dinner with such calm, quiet conviction, it gave me the first real hope I've felt in years. I'm in a similar position. My husband minimizes my accomplishments. He takes credit for my ideas. I've been telling myself it doesn't matter because we're partners. Watching you refuse to accept that narrative, it made me realize I've been lying to myself. Thank you. Thank you for showing me what dignity looks like. Denzel. I read that email 3 times. I thought my walkout was just personal, about me, my marriage. But Denzel's email, it revealed that other women had been watching. They were taking notes. They were finding courage. My refusal to be erased. It was giving them permission to fight for themselves, too. Sean, of course, spent the next few days cycling through every manipulation tactic in the book. The emails were wild. Sean, Friday 10 a.m. Jane, I'm sorry the joke landed badly. I never meant to hurt you. You know how much I value you. Let's just talk. The apology. Sean, Friday 11 a.m. You're being completely irrational. Everyone knew it was humor. You're the only one who took it seriously. This says more about your insecurity than me. The gaslight. Sean, Friday 5 p.m. I can't believe you're trying to destroy my career. After everything I've provided for you, this is how you repay me? The victim. I forwarded every single one to Queen. I never replied. On Saturday, he called Michelle, tried to get her to make me see reason. Michelle told him, and I quote, Sean, you shouldn't have publicly announced she had no contributions if you wanted her to stay silent about what her contributions actually were. And then she hung up on him. He was scared. Not about losing me. He was scared about what would happen when people found out he was a fraud who'd been taking credit for my work. His desperate attempts, they weren't about love. They were about damage control. The week passed. Wednesday afternoon, Queen's phone rang, a number we didn't recognize but were waiting for. She answered on speaker. This is Queen Adebayo. A voice I recognized, cold, powerful, and not happy, came through the speaker. Ms. Adebayo, this is George Stanton from Blackwood Capital. I'd like to discuss the matter raised in your letter. Would you and Mrs. Hamilton be available to meet tomorrow afternoon? Music swells, the final showdown. This is it. This is the moment. The boss, the one who laughed the loudest. He's not calling Sean. He's calling my lawyer. This is the kind of justice I'm talking about. And if you're not subscribed, you're going to miss what happens next. Are you a Jane or are you a Sean? If you're a Jane, you're already subscribed. You're part of this. You're on the team. If you're not, I'm worried for you. Are you just a tourist? Are you one of the laughers? This is your last chance to pick a side. Hit the subscribe button right now, or go to the comments and tell me straight up why you're siding with the enemy. Don't be a coward. Make a choice. We're available tomorrow at 2:00 p.m., Queen said, her voice pure ice. The Grand View Hotel, George replied. Conference room, 3rd floor. He was all business. The jovial, laughing boss was gone. He's coming to us, Queen said after she hung up. That means the letter worked. They're scared. They want to contain this. What does he want? I asked. To make this go away. Our job is to find out what he's willing to pay for that. That night, I barely slept. The next day, I dressed in a navy blue suit, my own armor, the Laurel Room at the hotel, beige walls, a conference table for 12, the kind of soulless corporate space designed for difficult conversations. George Stanton arrived at 2:00 p.m., on the dot. He was alone. He looked tired. The commanding presence from the dinner was gone. He shook Queen's hand. Then he turned to me. Ms. Adebayo, Mrs. Hamilton. He paused. Jane, thank you for meeting with me. We sat. He folded his hands, and he started. I want to start, he said, by apologizing for my behavior at the celebration dinner. I laughed at something that was not funny. I failed to recognize how inappropriate Sean's comments were. And my reaction? It gave permission for others to treat it as humor when it was anything but. He looked me in the eye. That failure of judgment reflects poorly on my leadership, and I am genuinely sorry. It sounded rehearsed, but sincere. Like he was angry he'd been put in this position. I appreciate that, I said. After receiving your letter, he continued, I spent considerable time reviewing the documentation. I also made some calls to key clients. He paused. I spoke with Tom Grayson from the Lewin account. He mentioned the dinner party you hosted. He said his wife still talks about the conversation you had about antique jewelry. He looked down at his notes. He also mentioned that the personal connection he felt was a significant factor in his decision to increase his portfolio with us. I just sat there. I found similar feedback from 3 other major accounts, George said. Your name. It came up, repeatedly. As someone who made clients feel valued, that's not wifely duty, Jane. That's business development, work that would command significant compensation if we had hired someone to do it. Queen sat beside me silent, a panther, just watching. Blackwood Capital values integrity, George said. What happened at that dinner? It falls short. But more than that, your letter has raised serious questions about whether we have a culture that allows people to take credit for work they didn't do. Whether that work comes from family members. He pulled out a folder. We would like to propose a solution, one that addresses your concerns, while maintaining discretion for everyone. Queen leaned forward. What are you proposing? George laid it all out. First, a settlement agreement, financial compensation, in 2 parts. Part 1, equitable division of all marital assets, including the Hamptons house and the hidden investment accounts. Part 2, a separate payment, labeled Business Development Consulting Compensation. It was payment for the client relationship work I had performed over the last 5 years, the total amount. It made my breath catch. It was more money than I had earned in my entire 10-year career before I quit. Second, a formal letter from Blackwood Capital on firm letterhead, acknowledging my contributions to facilitating key client relationships. It was carefully worded, but it was clear. It was documentation. It was proof. Third, mandatory training for all senior executives on professional conduct and recognition of contributions. There's one more component, George said, his voice dropping. Sean's behavior. It created a liability for us. The public nature of his comments, the ethical questions about credit. We are not terminating Sean's employment. But, he said, the promotion to senior vice president will not be moving forward as planned. He will remain at his current level, George said, with stipulations. Mandatory executive coaching, reduced client-facing responsibilities for 6 months, and a clear understanding that any future incidents will result in immediate termination. He watched my face. He was expecting, I don't know, glee. I just felt quiet. Consequences, real, tangible. Consequences. Is Sean aware of these terms? Queen asked. He's been informed, George said grimly. He's not happy, but he understands the alternative was termination. He signed the acknowledgement this morning. Queen looked at me, a silent question. Is this enough? I thought about the woman in the navy dress. I want one addition, I said. George looked surprised. The training, I said. The new training for your executives. I want to be involved in developing it, anonymously, but I want input on how you teach them to recognize invisible labor. George nodded, slowly. That can be arranged. Your perspective would be valuable. The final signing was a week later, at Queen's office. Sean had to be there. He walked in. I was startled. He looked awful. He'd lost weight. His expensive suit hung on him. There were dark shadows under his eyes. The king from the Atlas room was gone. He just looked small. We sat across from each other. Queen laid out the papers. Sean didn't look at them. He just stared at me. Why are you doing this, Jane? His voice was quiet, genuinely confused. Queen started to intervene, but I held up a hand. You destroyed what we built, Sean, I said. You decided my contributions were invisible. I'm just ensuring they get recorded accurately before we close the books. It was a joke, he said, but the conviction was gone. You meant exactly what you said, I replied, my voice dead calm. You believed I contributed nothing. And when my letter documented how wrong you were only concerned about protecting your career, not about the harm you caused. Everything I built, we built. You're just destroying it, he whispered. No, Sean, I said. You destroyed it. The moment you decided I was worth less than a laugh from your boss. I'm just making sure the destruction gets documented properly. And I saw it, for the first time, understanding. He finally got it. I wasn't coming back. His hand trembled as he picked up the pen. He signed, and he looked at me, one last time. I didn't know, he said, his voice barely audible. I didn't know you were doing all that. I thought you were just managing the house. I didn't realize it was work. The admission? 15 years too late. Well, I said, now you know. The story, it could end there. But it doesn't. Because the revenge that matters most, it wasn't his suffering. It was my thriving. I took the settlement. I found a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood I loved. I bought furniture I liked. I opened a new bank account. In my name. Only my name. And 6 months later, I stood at my new dining table, my laptop open. I was refining the business plan for Jane Strategic Partners, my consulting practice. My focus? Helping executives develop the exact strategic relationship management skills I had been providing for free for 15 years. My first 3 clients? They were referrals from Sean's former colleagues, people who had seen firsthand what I brought to the table. The irony? It was delicious. The skills I had been told were just support. They were my marketable expertise. I was good at this, and I was finally getting paid for it. The work satisfied me in a way I hadn't felt in ever. The recognition was explicit. The compensation was fair. The credit was all mine. I started running workshops. I'd met Denzel for coffee. She'd ended up leaving her own husband and her old firm. She was thriving. She suggested I run a workshop for her new company. I developed a 2-hour session, and I opened it with my story. The dinner, the toast, the walkout. The response was insane. People stayed after, lining up to share their stories, men and women. Stories of invisible labor, of contributions that went unacknowledged. My story, it gave them permission to be angry, to demand their worth. My revenge, it was never about destroying Sean, it was about reclaiming my narrative. 10 months after that dinner, I was invited to give the keynote address at the Women's Leadership Summit. I stood backstage, listening to my introduction. Founder of Jane Strategic Partners, consultant to executives, specialist in strategic relationship management and invisible labor recognition. They were describing me. I walked onto that stage. The lights were bright, hundreds of faces looking up at me. I took a breath, and I told them. I told them about the dinner, the toast, the laughter, and the choice. I told them that being supportive should never require you to be invisible. That partnership means mutual recognition, not one person's sacrifice enabling another person's glory. The applause, it was a wave, it hit me. I had walked away from a man who told me I had no ambition and no plan. And now, my calendar was booked solid. My ambition was my own, and my plan was working. Back in my apartment, I have a framed photo from that conference. Me, on stage. Under it, I wrote one line. Walked away, built better. My new life, it's not fragile. My income is mine. My reputation is mine. My self-worth is no longer up for negotiation. Sean thought that toast would get him a few laughs at my expense. What it actually did was give me perfect, brutal clarity. The humiliation that was meant to put me in my place. Instead, it showed me I deserved a different place entirely. I had walked away, and I had built better. Period. Music swells, then fades slightly for the final CTA. If this story of quiet strength and calculated justice resonated with you, hit that like button. Like. My favorite part? It's still that moment, that wine glass, that one perfect line. This is the last joke you'll ever make at my expense. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. And look, we've come this far together. Don't miss more powerful stories of people reclaiming their worth. Subscribe, hit the notification bell. You know you want to. Don't leave me hanging. I'll see you in the next one.